Ladies and gentlemen, namaskar. Welcome to the 15th edition of the Jaipur Literature Festival, protected by Dettol Banega Swasth India at Han Michalski Foundation, Beta. We are delighted to introduce A Place in My Heart. The session is presented by Dainik Bhaskar. Film critic and writer Anupama Chopra's A Place in My Heart is an ode to the power of storytelling, the magic of cinema, and the adoration of cinema-goers. In conversation with writer Shunali Khullar Shroff, Chopra unravels her place of work and worship, the films that have shaped her long career and fueled personal intrigue. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Hello, Anu.
Hi, Shunali.
It's lovely to see you here at GLF.
It's been a long time.
It's been a long time. Congratulations on your new book.
Thank you.
Yet another book. I don't know how you find the time between watching so much cinema. That's actually my opening question. You watch it for a living. You watch it day in and day out, and you've been doing this since 25 years. How do you go through it every single day? Is there no cinema fatigue ever?
You know, I love the movies. So honestly, it's a privilege to have a job that makes you watch movies. Is there cinema fatigue? Yes, sometimes there is, because, you know, people think being a film critic is this constantly enjoyable job, which it's not, because let me tell you, there's a lot of bad movies out there, okay? And I have seen more than my fair share. And there have been nights where, you know, you've gone to a press show and it started late, and then, you know, at like 11:30 at night, you're coming home, you haven't had dinner. It was a terrible film. And, you know, I've had this existential crisis, like, you know, this is it. My life is just going to go like this, watching bad movies. But then somehow, like the next day, you have the energy. And I'll tell you what's happened, specifically in the last 2 years, is this sort of opening up of my horizons. So it's not just Hindi cinema, but it's also Malayalam cinema and Tamil cinema and Telugu cinema, thanks to Bahubali, thanks to streaming platforms. So I'm like right now, like a kid in a candy store. I can't get enough.
So for those of you who don't know, Anupama's new book, A Place in My Heart, has a selection of 51 things, stroke people, stroke movies, that have a place in her heart. Clearly her heart's a very large place, because there are 51 people in there, things in there already, and I don't know who all she's offended by leaving them out. I'm certain she's made some enemies. How did you shortlist the 51, the lucky 51?
You know, truthfully, the heart is so big that I could write a sequel and do A Place in My Heart 2 and 3 and 4, because, you know, the films you love, there's not a finite sort of number to it. You know, and it's also about who you are and where you are at a certain place in time. And, you know, I go back to films that I didn't really love 10 years ago, and I find that I'm responding to them differently. So it's a very dynamic art form, and it constantly evolves. Even though the frame remains the same, it evolves because you change. So the way to shortlist was really cinema that was a mix of very popular, very obscure. In a sense, this book is a listicle, and one of my hopes is that it'll lead people to movies they hadn't considered watching earlier. So it's a mix of languages, it's a mix of north-south, mix of, you know, types of movies. But genuinely, the idea was to just find people, places, I mean, not places, but events in cinema, as well as movies that spark joy in me, to steal a line from Miss Kondo.
So starting with I'll come to your art as a writer later and what it takes to review a film, but I think let's start with the most important person in the book, which is Mr. Bachchan, AB. Now, Amitabh Bachchan is a chapter in a book. He deserves to be. He deserves to be a book, actually, also. In due course, I hope you'll write one. So he's famously difficult to interview, because, you know, he's got this dry wit, and sometimes he can make a very funnily caustic remark, which, you're not sure whether it was funny or are you a little humiliated, okay? He's a brilliant man who has the aura of brilliance and the aura of being the star that he is. So that's actually a lethal combination. How has your interaction been with him? And people would like to know who is the real Mr. Bachchan.
No, I can't claim I know the real Mr. Bachchan.
Through your interactions.
Yeah, because he is, like you said, he is.
Impenetrable.
He's also, he's done this for so long, Shunali, that he's such a pro. And I say this in that chapter on him. At one point he was recounting for me how he goes through the day, and at that time he had just started his blog, so he would be blogging at 12 at night and then waking up at 6 a.m. to go to the gym. And I was like, when do you sleep? And he, with a completely straight face, he looked at me and he said, during interviews. So, with him, it's just, he's just too seasoned an artist. And he will tell you exactly what he wants to tell you. And when you start to go on about, but sir, you are an icon, and he says, no, you're saying that. I don't think that at all. And he'll just stop you right there. So he doesn't.
Isn't that modesty disturbing?
It is. It is. And at times I've been like, oh, come on. Like, that almost comes out of my mouth. Like, no, you're
It's
joking.
like the Taj Mahal saying, I'm not the Taj Mahal.
Yeah, it is.
I'm Lal Killa.
It is. But he will not indulge that at all. He will not. He says, I'm still, when I go to a set, I'm still nervous. And I guess that's what keeps him going and going, is that energy of being a student after you've done it for 50 years.
Do you want to talk a little bit about his sense of timing and discipline and his...
Yeah, he was on time before the entire film industry was on time. Now everybody's on time, mostly. But he was the man who was always punctual. He has such a sense of discipline. With me, his pet peeve is that my Hindi is not good enough. And I'm from UP, so I have no excuse. I say this in my chapter on him, that he actually sort of shouted at me on Twitter once, saying ki, I had put down my New Year's resolutions. He was like, acha, aur Hindi bolne ka resolution kahan hai? And, he has, I don't know how many millions of followers. And I was like, oh my God. So, he's wonderfully funny, extremely disciplined, and from what I hear, he's made a film with my husband, and really like a student, which is remarkable.
Which is why he is who he is and continues to be relevant in everything that he does.
Every generation.
Every generation. Yeah. Speaking of generations, Sholay, that's the first chapter in your book, actually. It is a film that defines Indian cinema. It's been a landmark film, but it is set in those badlands, and it is set at a time that over the past couple decades are sort of almost unrelatable, because it's a Western, and the newest cinema. I don't think of Sholay as amazing and fabulous as the movie is. I'm not taking away from that. I'm not really sure it's a classic in that sense. So my question to you is, has Sholay aged well, in your opinion?
For me it has. And again, Shunali, it's such a personal response, right? So Sholay is one of my earliest movie memories. I remember being afraid of that background score when Gabbar walks into frame. I remember that so clearly, and I don't remember where I saw it or how old I was, but I remember being afraid of that sound. And it just embedded itself into me. And even now when I see it, sure, some things haven't aged that well, but because it was so timeless, because Jay and Veeru are wearing denims, and the Western, in a sense, is timeless, because the landscape is timeless. There's those rugged rocks, which could be now or 35 years ago. I think it has, and Gabbar is still as scary. He really is.
No, he is, but in the sense that, you don't really have Gabbars walking around in our lives now. The villain has really transformed and changed, and there was a lovely talk about that Balaji Vittal had given the other day. So in that sense, and there is no Thakur and Thakurai, that sort of a thing going on. And so maybe we are looking at it from a different lens.
Of course.
But for instance, do your kids like Sholay? Do their friends enjoy Sholay? Does this generation...
Which is why it's in my book, because they don't, right? So I just feel like, you have
Way
to know Sholay.
You have to do.
Yeah, you know, I work with, at Film Companion, which is the platform I edit, like some of the people who work with me are really, really young, and that's fantastic. But sometimes they say to me their film history begins with K3G, and I just go into a shock.
But K3G also finds a place in your book.
I love it. I love K3G. But like, you have to know Sholay.
That's true. So now since you've brought up K3G, there's a lovely quote by Yash Chopra in your book where he says that, you know, it's not a crime to be rich, okay? And maybe you can articulate it the way he would have. Can you say it like he would have?
No, I would. So Yashji was a lover of beautiful things and beautiful people and sort of noble emotions. So, you know, especially in his later movies, of course not when he was making Diwar and, you know, those films, those were gritty films which were tough in terms of the emotion. But I think the later ones, you know, Dil To Pagal Hai and of course Lamhe and, you know, all these just gorgeous people in gorgeous locations, you know, just grappling with matters of the heart. And he said to Rachel Dwyer, who wrote his biography, that it isn't a crime to be rich. And he said that, in fact, if you're talking about these kind of noble emotions, it's almost better if the characters...
Daily existence isn't a struggle.
It is.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're just struggling to put food on the table, love, you know, aur bhi gum hai zamane mein type.
But then that's exactly what critics accuse Zoya Akhtar and Karan Johar for making people really rich and giving them no real problems, except that people don't know that rich people have their own sort of problems, right? From your point of view, do you yourself also endorse Yashji's view?
Listen, I have...
You like K3G, so...
I think K3G is just deliciously fun. And I love... Thank you. And I'm against any kind of prescriptives for cinema. I don't want anyone to tell a filmmaker, please don't show rich people, or please only show this type of person, or don't show women as being bad, or don't show this, or don't show that.
Because the story is a story.
Yeah, and it's one person's vision. And they should have the freedom to put that vision across in whatever way and means they think is right. So, yes, like, let's say, Gehraiyan, okay, which was an extremely polarizing film that released recently. And in my review of that film, I said it does suffer from posh people angst.
Who has watched Gehraiyan over here? I want to interrupt and ask.
Of course, everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Almost
Who
everyone.
has watched but doesn't want to admit they've watched it? Okay, sorry, go on.
No, so I think in that film, and I've had this conversation with Shakun Batra, the director, the narrative couldn't get me to care enough about these people. And because it didn't get me to care enough, I started to get a little irritated by a conversation about goat cheese versus burrata. You know, but if I cared enough, it would be fine. So I think it just depends on if that script hooks you and if that script really involves you, then it's fine if they're rich, poor, religion, caste, whatever.
So I think it's the same with novels. I think people react to emotions and not always the environment. And human emotions are universal.
Absolutely.
Okay, so, in every country, every city, humor varies. Okay, people's idea of what's funny and not funny changes according to race and class. But emotions are always emotions. And you quote Abhijit Joshi about Kabhi Kabhi because it was a really random script. You know, he says that on-screen emotions trump logic. Yeah. Is this true for cinema across the world, or you specifically think that's so for South Asian entertainment?
No, I think it's true for every, you know, any sort of cinema. So this is a conversation I had with Abhijat, who wrote PK. Right, and he's a writer who works extensively with Raju Hirani and with my husband Vinod Chopra. So I had a problem with one of the narrative devices in PK, that the letter gets left and she doesn't see it. And I was like, come on, this is so ridiculous. How could you do that? And he said to me, but if the emotion is sweeping enough, the audience doesn't care. And they didn't. You know,
That's
they
true. It was
didn't.
an excellent film. I
Yeah,
love PK.
yeah. And so it's only curmudgeons like me who was sitting there कि लेकिन चिट्ठी क्यों नहीं देखी उसने?
That's because
Nobody
of
else
your
can.
Northwestern degree.
Perhaps.
Um, there's a bench that Karan Johar has a penchant for, featuring. You know, a book is full of these very interesting anecdotes. What is this bench thing?
So in many of his movies, you'll have his characters, mostly his protagonists, sitting on benches and having this conversation. It was there in K3G, you know, Shah Rukh and Ritika sitting there. I've seen it was also in the Kabhi Alvida, thank you. Kabhi Alvida na kehna, Rani and Shah Rukh, I want to say. And so I asked him why, and he said it's actually a conversation he's had with his counselor about why there is a bench, and the sort of hypothesis was that perhaps it's from childhood when he was in school and not really accepted, and he spent a lot of his recess time sitting on a bench by himself.
Bullied. Left out, yeah.
Left out. Maybe that's what's kind of replaying through his films. But it's fascinating to me that this trope, like in the films of Sanjay Leela Bhansali, there's the long pallu. You know, always. You remember the run in Devdas.
That's right.
You know, or in many of the other films, including Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam, there's this thing. And when he was choreographing the songs in 1942, if you go back to Pyar Hua Chupke Se, there's an orange floating dupatta. So it's a motif that he keeps repeating.
Well spotted, though, because till I read that, I hadn't realized. So now I want to talk about, since we are talking about Karan Johar, look, he speaks to a certain generation. He's fun. He's Gucci personified. Okay. And he doesn't hold himself back from taking a punch at all sorts of things. He can make you laugh. But the question I want to ask you is that above and beyond all of that, has he built a legacy, in your opinion?
I think he has. I think he has because his movies, whatever you think about them, are part of our popular culture. Those characters are part of our popular culture. And it's not just the films he's directed, but also the many, many films he's produced. Which have really kind of shaped, you know, the way we talk, the way we dress. I mean, you have to remember he was a key architect in the construction of the Raj Rahul Shah Rukh persona, which has really shaped popular culture for like 15 years. So yeah, absolutely, there's a legacy.
Which is why he's also a chapter in her book. Zoya's Luck by Chance, it's a beautiful film. I don't know how many of you have watched it. In my opinion, and I'm really no film critic, but in my opinion, it is her finest work yet. Do you agree?
I would. It's really a gorgeous, gorgeous film, starting with the opening credits, which kind of where the camera is just moving very fluidly on a shoot. And you see how movies are made.
The film in a film.
Yeah, it's a film in a film, and it's not glamorous. It's like watching the nitty-gritties, you know, the costume, the tailor masters and the costume guys, and it's just beautiful. It's a very romantic, aching kind of ode to the movies.
But how do you think she got it so right? Because she was 36 when she made this film, and she was the casting director before that. But there's a maturity to this film of hers that is rarely seen before in a debut film about a subject like this, okay? It's a very complex subject because you have to create the grandeur, but you have to show the struggles, you have to show personal relationships, intimacy, lack of it, things falling apart. It's very beautifully done. So after this movie, she has produced a couple of other films. Almost all of them have done well, but if you had to slot her, or if you had to classify her work, would you say she is more contemporary or more commercial? Where does she stand?
For me, Zoya is one of the best directors working today. There's no doubt about it. Thank you. She's just.
She is. She really is.
She's fantastic.
She's fantastic.
Look at that short that she made in Lust Stories with Bhumi. You know, just like, I don't know, must be 15, 20 minutes at best, and just stunning how much she says in that very, very short piece. I think she's very interesting because she combines a voice of a director with commercial tropes.
And a sensibility.
And a sensibility. So it's not generic cinema. It's not cinema that you could just, anyone could direct. Only she could have made Gully Boys, right? But what a fantastic film.
Or even Zindagi Na
Or
Milegi
Zindagi.
Dobara. What
Absolutely,
a film.
absolutely. And but it's not, it also has the star power. It also has these gorgeous songs. And she makes them carry over to people, who are there for broader-based cinema, who are there for more massy beats. And I think that's fantastic. She walks that fine line.
Another person who makes it to her book, who I think almost all of us here must really, really like or admire, is a phenomena called Priyanka Chopra. P for phenomena and P for Priyanka Chopra. What makes Priyanka Chopra, and what is the importance of being Priyanka Chopra, in your opinion? And this better be a longish answer. There's so much to cover here because, there have been so many actresses who've, tried to look westward and get a gig there, but no one has not only survived the Western, I wouldn't say just Hollywood, because she's done TV as well. She's come out with music videos. She is like a chameleon. She keeps herself relevant, keeps transforming, and every avatar is lapped up so easily and readily. And the other thing I'd like you to talk about is also her work ethic, because that's something else altogether, I believe.
So that's what I think it is. It is a work ethic that is just relentless, And I first interviewed, I want to say, like in the early 2000s. It was just after Aitraz. So very much at the beginning of her career, And so there's the formidable work ethic. She works like a crazy beast, no matter how successful she is, which is brilliant. But there's also the risk-taking element of her, So right way back at the beginning, she was, I want to say Miss World or Miss Universe?
She was Miss World, I think.
World.
Miss World.
World, na? Huh. So massive beauty queen comes into the movies. Like third or fourth film is Aitraz, where she's evil. She's this awful woman. And remember, at that time, we were not, women who wanted sex were just awful. That was it.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
yeah, it's true. And she's trying to seduce Akshay Kumar's character. And that seduction scene is, if you go back and see it on YouTube, it's insane because she is the one who's like all over him. And at the nth moment, one locket with his wife, played by Kareena Kapoor, shines, and he looks at it and he's like, oh my God, he remembers who he's supposed to be. It's hilarious. But at that time, this was radical. This was like unheard of, and she did it. She took that risk. And then look at the risk involved with a top-tier Bollywood actor moving to Hollywood and becoming a newcomer again. I think that sort of takes another level of being sorted about your ego that not a lot of people in Bollywood have, and she could do it.
But what's the secret sauce of all sorts of audiences in India and outside of India liking her? Deepika is exquisitely beautiful too, but she didn't have that sort of luck.
But Shunali, I think it's also making that commitment that I will be there, I will live there. See, Aishwarya didn't live there either, So I think that sort of thing, that I'm moving and I'm going to live like 8 months in Toronto or wherever it was. I went to do an interview with her in New York, and this was season 2 of Quantico, and like the entire day I met her at like 9:30 a.m., we drove to the set together. She was there all day. After the set, she had changed the makeup, goes to a party for some magazine where she's on the cover. After that, like, she's dropping me off, and I'm like ready to just die, okay? I was like, is this day over now, please? Can we go home? No, she is going to rehearse. So
actually,
that's amazing.
There was a time when she was flying back and forth between India and
On weekends.
And we have a very dear friend in common, and I asked her, how does she do it? And firstly, my question was to do with her fitness. I said, when did she find the time to work out? Because she looks so slim. And so she said, I don't think she has the time to work out, but she's always working, and as soon as she lands here, she goes to the set. because she was completing a film still, which was again is very, what was the movie called?
Bajirao Mastani.
Bajirao Mastani, yeah. So I mean, no jet lag. I mean, she's just blessed with looks that, don't age, and lack of sleep doesn't tell. But that's some sort of work ethic that, I guess you're right. She's where she's because of that. And since you talked about her character in Andaz, I want to now discuss with you the evolution of the Indian heroine through the ages, starting with Nargis in Andaz in 1949, where she was used to ride a horse, and she was too Western, and therefore a Western heroine meant a bad woman, or a woman, free-spirited woman was sort of classified as bad. And all the evil women of the time used to smoke, and Nadira and, that generation. Then came, so then there was Purab and Paschim also with Saira Bano. The whole concept of a virginal heroine, she had to be a virgin. She couldn't have had even like exchanged glances with a man, because then she was impure. Yeah. And so then from there we moved on to a time where the allusion to immortality, which was tied in with a very Western outlook, transformed, and then the generation of star kids came. And like Balaji was saying today, that we'd seen them grow up, and so it was easy to accept Kareena and Karishma in all sorts of khatiyas and those sort of whatever roles, very eloquently done. So there was that, and of course, and in between that, sorry, I forgot, there was Zeenat and Parveen, right? And then cut to today, where we have Gehraiyan, where she barely keeps her clothes on, allegedly. I haven't still watched the film. So just go over this evolution of the Indian heroine from then until now with me. And how you see it.
Of course, Andaz was the first, as far as I know, sort of portrayal of friendship between a man and a woman. And of course, the man misunderstands it for something else. It isn't friendship for him, but it is
She's
for her.
friend-zoned him. Basically.
She's friend-zoned him, basically. And he's like, hey, but this was like 40-something, right? So, of course, listen, the virginal heroine wasn't placed till DDLJ, which is 1995. Remember, they spent a night in a hotel room, but nobody did anything. Because मुझे पता है हिंदुस्तानी औरत की इज्जत क्या होती है. That's the Raj dialogue, So this has only changed, I would say, literally in the last 10, 15 years. In the 90s, we were still making a big hoo-ha about who is and isn't chaste, quote unquote, right. Who is and isn't like heroine-like. I remember Malaika Sherawat did a film where the number of kisses caused
18 or 32 or something.
Yeah, it was like, that was it. My God, they kissed so many times. I'm like, but what's the story?
But there was no story.
There was no story. It was...
That was the story.
That was it. So, but I want to say that I think the success, for me, the sort of demarcation line is really Vidya Balan and the success of The Dirty Picture. And of course, you've had tremendous actors before that. I mean, Nargis set the tone for everything with Mother India. You've had Nutanji and Wahida Rahman, and just generation after generation of spectacular female actors. But the portrayal of this woman, I think in modern times, in contemporary times, really changed with the success of that film. That film made an enormous amount of money, and everything, at least until recently in Bollywood, was run by the box office. And then after that, you get a spate of films in which women are the sort of shouldering it, from Razi to Kangana's movies like Tanu Weds Manu and the both of those, the other films she's done, Queen, more recently Gangubai. I think the success of these films, the entry of a new generation of actors, the entry of women in every sphere of filmmaking has really created a massive change and we have a long way to go.
Yeah, but I
don't
think
get too happy.
Life reflecting art.
Absolutely.
Or
women
art
are different.
reflecting life.
Yeah.
So I think things are changing. But there's an important woman character I missed out on, because you mentioned cars in your book, and I mean... Kamini. Oh, she is my all-time favorite. Spectacular. Yeah. Simi Garewal did more than just justice to that role. And Kamini not only overshadowed, as you wrote, Tina Muneem, the lead heroine, but also Sir Judah, the main villain.
Yeah.
So, what makes Kamini so memorable in your view?
You know,
And has there been another like her?
not really. Also because that time, I mean, I can't remember the exact year of Karz's release, but it's 83, I want to say. And at that time, to have a woman who is slightly older, but is sort of getting romantically involved with Monty, who's played by Rishi Kapoor, who is much younger than her. So you're acknowledging that this older woman can be desirable and can have desire, which is like, oh my God, like
That's
what an
why
idea.
she's a villain. I mean, that's why she's...
Of course, but she's also a villain because she killed her husband, Shunali.
That's by the way. I forgot about that.
She just drove over him with her jeep.
Oops.
But she's phenomenal. I don't know how many of you have seen Cars, but you should go back and see it. It's wonderful. And of course she has to die badly at the end because like how can a woman like that get away with it? But till she got away with it, she was fab.
Now, before I just have very little time left and I open the panel to questions from the audience, I want to talk about this wonderfully unconventional oddity of a turban-wearing man called Diljit Dosanjh, who figures in her book, and I am so happy about that. Because, you know, he's not like your typical, these days now, all our heroes are urban men, right? They are all city slickers, and there's a very funny, Daljit barely even strings an entire sentence in English together. You know, he'll pepper it with Punjabi or whatever else. And he's a Pendu Munda, as you say. Pendu means from a village. And yet his appeal is something, it's undeniable. Young people like him and middle-aged people like him. And so what I wanted to ask you about him was that what made you choose him? I mean, there are so many other people who've been left out, and why is he there in your book? And please tell us about the Kanye West tweet. I wanted to read that out, actually. I can open it for you in the book.
Please.
So while you describe him, I'll pull that out.
So he's just spectacular, I think. And that success story to me has given me great joy. So I met him, I interviewed him before Urta Punjab released. You know, I'd seen 1984, which he was very, very good in. So I kind of found him through the director of 1984. And it was funny the first time he met, like, you know, my Hindi is not very good. He only speaks Punjabi. And somehow we chatted. And I think with him, it's just, he's such an authentic voice, right? Nothing changes. He's now this global superstar selling out stadiums. Shunali, you will have to read it. आपने चश्मा पहना है, मेरे पास तो है ही नहीं. देखो जी, middle age में बहुत लफड़े होते हैं. So he was just, he said, नहीं, हो जाएगा, ma'am, हो जाएगा. And just the enthusiasm and just the acknowledgement of who he is, where he comes from. He says, of course, मैं पेंडू हूँ. उसमें क्या है? His stories about his village, Dosanjh village in Punjab, where like how he started out singing in a gurdwara. And this hasn't changed. He's head to toe Gucci now, but nothing changes. You know,
and what I love is the turban's still around, and the turban is what makes him still so. The first hero we've ever had who wears a turban and who has women falling over him.
Absolutely. You know? And if you go on his Instagram, you must follow him.
Oh, I should.
There is like these hilarious reels of him fighting with Alexa because Alexa can't understand the accent. Okay. It's fab. And he's not in the least embarrassed, and as you shouldn't have to be. So he's an example of a truly authentic person, and I love that.
So I'll just read this little thing from here, where Anupama writes, Diljit and I didn't speak the same language. He's most comfortable in Punjabi and I in English, and yet we managed to communicate. Chatting for almost an hour about his incredible journey, his excitement at working with Kareena Kapoor in Urta Punjab, and his desperate desire to own a pair of Adidas Yeezy 350s. At one point, and this is quite telling, it's just a tweet, but it tells you so much about the person in a nutshell. At one point, he made a direct-to-camera plea to rapper designer Kanye West, saying, Kim Kardashian ke husband, jab shoes banate ho, don't make them out of stock. Do logo ko. This is
And I have to tell you, I'm so not up on the fashion game that I didn't even know what he was talking about. And I'm like, Easy, kya bola, kya bola? And I'm trying like to not let this show on my face. And he's like, Easy. Then I told Bacha. Then Bacha said this. Then he showed me a message. He said to Bacha, Bacha, मुझे भी चाहिए. And Bacha said, Paji, कुछ और ही मांग लेते. कुछ मैं दे देता, but Easy's नहीं है. And I was like, what is this conversation about? I had no idea.
But even the way he took down Kangana on Twitter, it was so classy. It was so classy. That was a gentleman, and that shows to you that to be urbane and to be sophisticated, you don't have to only speak English with a clipped accent. It's from here. It starts from here. You know, he didn't humiliate her, insult her. He was just so funny about it. Yeah. And now, I'm sorry, you all can probably only ask one or two questions because I've taken up your airtime, but I'm opening it up to the audience now. Okay, yeah, Balaji, ask. And then just pass the mic around. I don't want to...
You can hear me very well.
I don't want to get make enemies in the audience, so you guys just figure it out.
I haven't read your book still, but I will. Does Kundan Shah find a place in your heart?
Oh, completely. Because Jaane Bhi Do Yaro, remember, is also Vinod Chopra's acting debut. He is there in that climax as the Shah son, and he was a production controller on that film.
Yeah.
Also the names, absolutely, Sudhir and Vinod.
And just questions, please. Yeah, we don't want comments. Just make it short so other people can all ask. Yeah,
Just
please,
to say that the 70-year-old can give you a round of applause and say we still love films. That's it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank
You can buy her book soon after this. Yeah, that person at the backyard.
So, Anupama ji, you have, spoken about Sholay, and one of the most influential figures of the 21st century is Ram Gopal Verma, who made, Satya. Yeah. But he also made Ram Gopal Verma ki Aag. So, what did you think of that movie? And tell us what has happened to that guy, because you have been interacting with him for so many years.
So, listen, it's very funny because I think Ramu's just a wonderfully sort of irreverent person. And when I asked him about Satya, we did a big interview for 25 years of Satya, and I was like, but how did you do it? And he's like, there was no script, Since I started writing scripts, my films became bad. So I can't tell you what has happened, but I think you're absolutely right. The movies he's made, Shiva and Rangila, my God, I mean, Rangila is just spectacular. And the things that Rangila did in terms of shaping the narrative of Hindi cinema. So he was absolutely a game changer. As for what has happened now, I don't know. I remember one interview I did maybe 4-5 years ago. He said to me, he gave one of his, provocative quips, just something that was meant to rile me up. Something about women are about sex and men are about power. And it just came out of my mouth. And I'm like, what rubbish, ya Ramu? So this is on camera. And he's like, but you can't tell me it's rubbish. I believe that. So I was like, oh God, I'm sorry. That was rude of me. So I can't tell you. I have no idea. But yes, he was absolutely a game changer. Listen, even he knows it was terrible.
Lady in the front.
Hello. Ma'am, over here in the front.
Oh, sorry.
Ma'am, a big fan of yours. I just wanted to ask, because you tend to ask this question in your every interview to every director and actor, that what's their process? Like, how do the actors get into the character of the film that they're doing? So I want to ask that question to you. Like, what is Anupama Chopra's process when she writes a film review? Like, do you have a workshop of your own? Or like any...
I do, and I know critics who don't watch like any trailers or... and of course, I'll never read anybody else's review before writing mine. And we don't even have conversations. So, at Film Companion, there's a bunch of us looking at the same movies, but we'll never ask each other, what did you think? Because that can color what you're going to say. But I like personally to read up as much as I can. If required, watch other films. So if it's a remake, I want to see the original. If a director like for Gehraiyan, Shakun is very influenced by the films of Woody Allen. So I went back and watched Hannah and Her Sisters, because that is a movie he says is very, it's something that really has moved him. So I try and do as much homework as I can before I go into a film. But once you're in the film, it is the film. It is every frame that speaks to you and what you bring to it.
But I have a question as a follow-up to that, which is that there's a lot riding on a film review, right? You can, and it takes so much heartache to make a film, and then, you know, one bad review and 2 stars or 1 star and it's finished. Do you ever feel the weight of that on your shoulders when you're writing a
Shunali,
review?
I have no such delusion that a lot rides on my review.
Collectively, I mean, people see reviews. They do.
I don't know.
Do you all base... do you all actually see reviews and then decide whether you want to watch the film or not? There you go.
Thank you. That's very kind. My experiences have been, in fact, Shunali's father-in-law, the wonderful Shah Rukh Shroff, who was one of the big distributors of Hindi cinema back in the 90s, used to tell me, and I was just telling her, कि तुमको अगर नहीं अच्छी लगी, मुझे पता है hit होने वाली है. So he was always happy when I gave a bad review. But genuinely, no, I can't think of things. I have to be honest to how I feel, and I can't think of, will this be a hit, will this be a flop, will people hate me, will they troll me, will I lose followers? You can't think of any of that.
That's exactly how it should be, actually.
Question at the back, please.
Yeah. You know, this lady in the black polka dot, her hand's been up very long, so after that you can bring it here. Yeah.
हेलो मैम सो मेरा क्वेश्चन ये था कि इंडियन सिनेमा में जो कोटिशियंस के कैरेक्टर्स होते हैं चाहे वो मीना कुमारी का पाकीज़ा में कैरेक्टर हो या फिर रिसेंटली तबू का सूटेबल बॉय में या फिर गंगूबाई का, तो वो हमेशा ये खूबसूरती के नज़रिए से तो बहुत अच्छे होते हैं लेकिन बहुत ट्रेजिक भी होते हैं. तो और वो हम एक ही मतलब बहुत सारी सिमिलैरिटीज़ होती हैं उन कैरेक्टर्स में, तो उसके आपके मतलब उसके ऊपर क्या व्यूज़ हैं?
You mean कौन से कैरेक्टर्स?
कोटिशियंस या फिर सेक्स वर्कर्स?
राइट. लेकिन अगर आप गंगूबाई देखें, आई थिंक शी इज़ वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग. सी ट्रेजेडी तो बिल्ट इन ही होगी ना, देयर हैज़ टू बी ट्रैजिक एलिमेंट. लेकिन मुझे गंगूबाई पसंद आई क्योंकि आई फेल्ट कि वो शी वॉज अ वुमन हु डिड नॉट गिव इन. जो सर्कमस्टांसेस थे, शी डिड नॉट से कि भैया मैं बेचारी हूँ. शी इन दो सर्कमस्टांसेस उन्होंने अपने रूल्स क्रिएट किए और वो लड़ी. सो आई थिंक इन फैक्ट कि वो नैरेटिव काफ़ी अलग है पाकीज़ा से, यू नो, एंड इट्स वंडरफुल, एंड आई होप कि वी सी मोर ऑफ दैट. सो सॉरी, there's that lady at the back. Yes.
Yeah. So I studied in a media college, and we studied things from Shyam Benegal to for movies like Gone with the Wind, and at the end we were all also like people who appreciated films like Dhoom 2 and Dil Chahta Hai and Welcome also for that matter, and we enjoy it, and we also think that they are very well-made films because appealing to the masses is also not an easy job. But where do you think is, like, they're also not considered very critically acclaimed as such in the mainstream cinema. Where do you think the cross-section is of appealing to the masses and still being critically acclaimed?
It's a great question.
It is. Thank you for that question. I think really that's the holy grail. You know, that quadrant where you work for the critics as well as working for viewers. And it is a hard one to crack. Not many films really managed to do it. I'm trying to think. For me, that film was Lagera O Munna Bhai, which was just a wonderful film that really spoke to people. It is a tough one, but let me tell you, as far as I'm concerned, I don't go into a movie with any bias because it's a mass quote-unquote film. I think that would be a disservice to the film. I go in wanting to love it as much as everyone else. And I think it's also a fallacy कि critics को तो इस type की ही picture अच्छी लगती है. That's not true. I mean, I'm a big fan of, let me think, what's the one? Listen, I'm the only one in the country who liked Befikre, okay?
I loved it.
Did you?
I loved it too.
Aditya Chopra told me I got more flack for the film than he did. So I think that is the sort of brilliant kind of cross section that every filmmaker aspires to be in, but it's not easy to do.
I wanted to quickly mention that I don't know how many of you know this, that her mother is Kamna Chandra, who wrote Chandani. It's my all-time favorite film.
Yeah.
And Prem Rog.
Yes.
Prem Rog.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know what they eat in that family, because her brother is Vikram Chandra, the novelist, Sacred Games for You, and her sister is Tanuja Chandra. So after this, when you go to the lounge, you can tell me what you were fed when you were growing up. Yes. The lady in the front, and then I think we'll wrap up. This is the last one.
Greetings for a great day ahead to both of you. My question may seem a little irrelevant, but I have seen you interviewing people since I was very small. Young, I would rather say. No. But my question is, you are a Bollywood journalist in Clarity, a section which deals with rosy things all around, and learning about 51 things which are important in your heart. We would also like to know a memoir of your life highlighting about at least 2 phases which were very difficult for you and how you overcame that. I know it's highly irrelevant, but it's a quest to know about you.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't think anybody will read my life ka memoir in any case.
Maybe you can conduct a workshop on how to write a film review, actually.
Sure.
I think that's an idea, because a lot of these people probably would be interested in something like that, you know.
Sure.
So anyway, this was it, guys. Thank you so much, Anupama. You've been
Thank
a lovely,
you.
lovely participative audience. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much.